Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Jason and this is part 2 in my series on how to use the Garmin Catalyst app to review and analyze the data that was collected while using your Garmin Catalyst on your phone or tablet. If you haven't already watched part 1, I would recommend it, as that video covers some fundamentals about using the Catalyst app that will also apply in this video. So in this video, we will be talking about how to use the graphs feature in the Garmin Catalyst app to analyze your laps and performance. To get to the graphs, you'll choose a track or day from the home screen and then choose a session. You can then select the graphs section by clicking on the button on the top right. This will automatically load your best session into the graph, but you can look at any lap from that session by choosing the lap from the drop-down menu. So let's start with what this screen is telling us. As you can see, we have a track map or track layout that will represent your point on this track. We also have a speed row, which represents your GPS measured speed during the lap. We have an acceleration row, which represents your longitudinal acceleration. This is your forward and back motion as you're braking and accelerating. And we have a cornering G-force readout. So this is your lateral acceleration, or as you corner left to right, how the car loads up. So with this one, imagine the car traveling down this line. And as you turn to the left, your car, the weight will shift to the right. And that's what this is reading here. And then it will return to neutral as you travel down a straightaway. And then as you turn to the right, the car will load, the G-forces will shift to the left. So that's how you would read this particular graph. If you click on any point here, you can see that we get some additional information. Now we see on this map, we see a red dot representing the vehicle position on the map. We also get a speed readout at that point, the longitudinal acceleration, as well as the lateral acceleration. And so we can use this little scrub bar here to identify any point along this map and see what our speed, acceleration, and cornering G-forces are. You can also pinch and zoom on this map. If you really want to focus on a particular area, you can zoom in. You know, if you're interested in what you did here, right? This looks like an example of maybe a little lift, right? A throttle lift where it returned, the vehicle settled to neutral, and then we started accelerating again. So we didn't really brake here, but we definitely looks like we maybe lifted off the accelerator to settle the car so that we could get into this turn right here, right? And you can see how the speed graph actually flattens out at that point, representing that we sure did lift here. So let's zoom back out. So this is interesting information, right? We can see how the car is performing, where it's loading, where it's unloading. The real value of this is when you start to compare with other laps or compare to your optimal lap. So if you choose from this drop down, let's choose our optimal lap. So this is our theoretical best lap. This is basically what the Catalyst has done is observed all of your driving and put together what it thinks is your optimal theoretical best lap. So it's based on all of the laps that you've put in and all the variables that have been introduced as you've driven around the track. So, you know, if you turned a little earlier or a little later, or if you accelerated for longer, or, you know, braked a little harder or deeper, it's taking all that data, gathering all that data, and making recommendations along the way. And so in doing so, it puts together, based on all your best segments, a theoretical optimal lap. So let's choose that, and we're going to compare that to the best lap that we ran in this session. So now that we've chosen the optimal lap as a comparison, now you're going to notice that this changes a little bit. So now we have 4 rows. The additional row is for time. And so your green line here represents your best lap. And the purple line represents how far ahead or behind your optimal lap is relative to your best lap. So you can see we actually do, in this spot where we're ahead on time, and we'll look at the graphs above to figure out why that is. And then actually here we actually lose a little time, right? Our optimal lap isn't quite as good as our best lap was. So what I like to do is use both pieces of data, because really what your optimal lap is the best of both of these lines, right? The best of these lines combined, the best of this data combined is really what your optimal lap is. So we'll dig into the data a little bit, but that's how I tend to use this line, is how can I make the best of whatever lap I'm looking at and whatever laps I've done in the past. How can I combine those to put together one super optimal lap, right? Because our optimal might actually be, 149.8 or something like that, right? If we were able to combine all of the little nuances that we're going to look at here into one lap, we're going to see our optimal improve. The other thing you're going to notice here is that now we have comparisons in the map below. So now we can compare speed at any given point, our longitudinal acceleration at any point, and our cornering g-forces at any point, as well as the time differential. So with that, let's rewind this back to the beginning of the lap. And so you can see here, one of the reasons that this optimal lap is reading as optimal, we were carrying 0.7 of a mile per hour more just at the start finish line alone. So clearly we have an advantage in our optimal lap versus the best lap that we ran in this session. And we can see that here, right? We can see that in the speed line where the purple line is above the green line a little bit. We can see that our cornering g-forces are roughly the same. And our acceleration is pretty much the same, right? There's not a lot of difference here. This is just throttling down a straightaway, really full throttle here. And the way to look at this is the faster you go, right? At this point, we're going 108 miles an hour. We're steadily building some speed, 115, 116 miles an hour. You don't feel that forward to backward acceleration force so much at those higher speeds, unless you have some sort of ridiculously torquey, crazy high horsepower car. The faster you go, the less you're going to feel the effects of that acceleration, right? When you're accelerating from a standing stop in first gear, sure, you're going to, that acceleration g-force is going to push you back in your seat and you're really going to feel it. But as that speed builds, you don't feel it as much, right? And that's really what this is telling us, is that the acceleration is fairly neutral. It's fairly close to that 0 point, right? And we can see it here, right? It's only 0.06. It's almost nothing from an acceleration standpoint. And as we scrub along this line, what we'll see here is, the other interesting thing to note here is that this straightaway isn't really straight. So we're actually loading the car up, right? We're actually turning left here a little bit. And so we're loading the car to the right. So that cornering g-force is going to be felt here. And then it looks like, the now things start to straighten out a little bit. This straightaway actually becomes straight. And now you'll see that our cornering g-forces are like 0, right? They're very flat to this dotted line. And that just means we're no longer cornering, we're traveling in a straight line. So we're not really applying any lateral g-forces either. And so we see, so what I like to do is look at these inflection points, because that's where your speed is going to come from. So let's scrub forward here a little bit and see, because we were gaining time on our optimal lap was better, right? We were traveling faster. We had a better lap here, but then it changes. And so let's take a look at why that might be. So if we scrub forward, we actually see right up here, and let's zoom into that. Let's see if we can find it here. It's a little tricky to zoom in here. Here we go. So as we zoom in, we can see that the green line is actually ahead of the purple line. So what this means from a speed perspective is that you carried more speed into the corner for longer, right? So we can see our g-forces are pretty similar, but look at how the time, we've actually swapped time now, right? Our our best lap is ahead of our optimal lap. And it's really because we carried more speed through this turn. This is turn 14. We ran this track clockwise, so it's run in the reverse direction that is normally driven, but the corner numbers remain the same. So this would be, you're counting down instead of up. So this is corner 14, 13, 12, etc. So you can see here, why this differential happens, what's going on here. And what we see is we just carried more speed, right? We're looking at almost 4 miles an hour more into and sort of almost to apex on this first turn. So what we want to do, what we want to learn from that is that we can carry more speed, even from our optimal. Let's try to carry more speed into this turn 14. Now you'll notice here, now we start to learn that speed, right? There's a point here, this peak, and this inflection point where the lines cross again, where now the optimal is actually starting to take over again. And let's try to take a look at why that is. So it looks like we were on the throttle here a little sooner, right? This green line means we weren't really accelerating, we weren't decelerating, we were sort of neutral. Whereas even though we lost a little time here, we were able to get back on the throttle earlier through this corner and into the apex, and that actually gained us some time back that we lost. So now we'll see, if we scrub forward here, look at how this has flipped now. So where we were 4 miles an hour faster into the corner, now we're 4.5 miles an hour faster out of the corner. So everything that we gained here, we lost. So we want to we want to combine these effects, right? We want to combine the late braking and sort of turn this into one line if we theoretically could. Because that's really going to truly optimize our lap when we can put all these things together. So let's continue to scrub forward here, and we can see now that we've gained that time, we're going to continue to sort of eat back into the lead that the best lap had over the optimal, and we're going to scrub forward to our next inflection point. All right, so here we are traveling through 13, very similar g-forces, similar acceleration, maybe a little bit steeper drop off, right? Maybe there was a little instead of lifting and sort of coasting, which is what the green line kind of looks like, right? And the flatter this line, the more likely it is that you're sort of coasting. Maybe we hit the brakes just a little bit here to settle the car for this left-hander. So we continue to scrub forward, and now we get to our next inflection point. And what we're seeing here is now the time for the optimal really begins to slip away. And let's zoom out again here if we can. Here we go. So now we're looking at the whole lap, right? So you'll see all these different inflection points, and this is a big one. I got a big one here. We've got an opposite one here. So we did something wrong here. And then right after that, we did good things again where that's going down, and maybe we lost a little bit. And then we got a really steep curve here. So we really gained. Right, and that's how I like to read this graph, is I'm looking for these points where I can improve or what I did to improve. Right, so this is needs improvement. This is I applied some improvement and I need to continue doing that. So let's scrub forward here, and here we can see again, we're just accelerating better through. This is a long, it sort of opens up this corner, right? You can see how it's an increasing radius, basically. So it looks like we just got to the throttle sooner as we got into this corner, and we're able to maintain that that acceleration over a longer period of time which pulled us through this corner a lot better, right? So we see this sustained acceleration through this right-hand turn. So the car is loaded up to the left. G-forces are very similar, right? We didn't really do anything different as far as the way we turned through that corner, it doesn't look like. But we can see we were just on the throttle longer and deeper. And that really is why we're seeing this difference. And it doesn't look like a lot here, right? It's 2 miles per hour more, not a ton of extra speed, half mile per hour more. But through a corner, through a sustained corner like that is taking you a long time to get through, right? There's probably 2 or 3 seconds in here, right? It feels like forever that you're moving through this corner. That half a mile an hour is going to make a difference. So let's continue to scrub forward, and as we look again, we're seeing this line sort of flatten and actually move back up towards the green. So let's take a look at this next section. Okay, so as we approach this next turn, so this would be turn 10, we notice again that the green line for our acceleration is above our purple line. So it's above our optimal lap. And if we look at this data, and again, let's try to zoom in here and see what's going on. What we can see here is that we had a much bigger lift off of the throttle in our alleged optimal versus what we did what we actually did in our best session, or in our best lap of this session. So you can see here we lifted a little bit, but we got back on the throttle again as we entered this apex. As we got around to it, we settled the car, right? It looks nice and neutral there. Settled it, got it turned in, and we're able to get back on the gas and throttle through this apex. And you can see here we really sort of played with the throttle, and it's a nice steady line, but we need it to be higher and increasing a little faster, right? And what you can see here is the difference again in speed as we exit, 1.5 miles an hour more down a valuable straightaway. You don't get a lot of straightaways on this course. And this one is relatively flat and straight, which is unique for this race course. So we want to take advantage of that. And we did in our best lap, in our green lap. We definitely were able to get on the throttle, sustain that throttle application down the straightaway. And what it did was it led to more speed carried, right? Over 1.5 miles an hour more. Really, just as you enter the straightaway, that's a big difference. And you can see the net result of that is that this purple line is actually moving closer to the green line because our optimal lap, our theoretical optimal, has lost time to the best lap that we ran. So we'll continue to move forward here. And again, we did it again, right? So right here, it looks like we carried more speed into turn 9, right? We actually, it looks like maybe we got onto the throttle a little later or lifted a little bit, right? There's a little bit of a difference here, but it makes up, right? You can see this bump here, this hill, right? And here's the other thing. We can look at our cornering G-forces and see, did we turn later or earlier, right? So this purple line tells us that we turned later. So if this is time, right? If the horizontal axis is time, the further to the right that line is, the later it happened. So the other difference here, and the other reason why we sort of lost time, is that we turned maybe a little later, and maybe that didn't help us, right? It didn't help us enter this turn or set up for this turn in the right way. So this turn's interesting because it's an uphill left-hand turn. There's not a lot of camber when you enter. The camber sort of picks up, a third of the way into the corner, maybe even a little further in than that. And then there's some camber inside, and then the camber falls away again as you enter the straight. So you've really got to sort of get your turn done, get it into that camber as best you can, and then as you're throttling out, really trail out, right? Really run out to the grass here on exit. And so you can see here what we've done is we turned later in our best lap, and that might have hurt in our optimal lap, our purple line, and that might have hurt us. It might behoove us to maybe turn a little earlier. And again, the net effect of this is as we go forward, we start to see that we were able to, right here, we're sort of playing with the throttle on the optimal, right? We sort of get on it and lift a little bit and try to settle the car and get back on the gas and settle it a little again, and then get back on the throttle again. Whereas on the green, we actually just were able to get on the throttle, stay in it, apply a little more as we apex. Right, as we get around that apex, we're starting to give it a little more throttle, and that actually helps us, right, a little by about a mile an hour more on the exit. Now, again, what's interesting here is we start to lose time again. So there's something that happened here that we got into the corner better, but we didn't get out of it quite as well. So maybe we had a little wheel spin here, right? Maybe there was a little bit of oversteer that actually slowed us down a hair, because we seem to lose that time. So we were really good on entry. We really crushed it entering this corner, but looks like we can exit a little better because we start losing time to our optimal lap again. And as we scrub forward, we can see that time falls away. And here we are again. We've exited this turn 9, this tricky turn 9. We're going down this straight. This is a really short straight, and it's not very straight. So we're still traveling uphill, and we have to move from the right side of the track to the left to sort of try to set up for this next turn, which is turn 8. This turn's a little hairy. The reason for it is it's blind. You come over a crest right at the apex of this turn, and so you have to trust that the track is on the other side, and so it's very easy to maybe lift a little too much, and we're definitely going to see that as we enter this corner, that it's easy to lose time here because you're afraid, right? Everyone talks about this corner and how it is unsettling and sort of their least favorite corner from a confidence perspective. And so as we enter this, right, as we go down this little straight, we can see we actually started our turn maybe a little bit earlier, just a hair. We are carrying more speed, so maybe we didn't lift quite as much, or maybe in the green one, we maybe even tapped the brakes just a hair, right, as we decelerate. And you can see that speed differential is huge here, right? 3.5 miles an hour more as we approach this corner, and we really just carry that speed right on through that turn 8 apex. Still ahead, still ahead, still ahead. Look at how we get to the throttle sooner. We're throttling through that apex. Lots of confidence. We felt really good at some point in one of our laps prior to this session, and that's what has built our optimal. And it is looking like we just felt like a champ at some point, and we need to just continue to do that, right? So maybe there's an opportunity to turn in a little bit, get the car settled, and really sort of gently start accelerating through that apex, getting that car settled, trusting that the track is there on the other side. And then we come down. Now, again, this is sort of an interesting straightaway. You're sort of moving, left to right a little bit, right? You have to track way out over here because of that late apex and the way that the hill falls away from you as you come over the crest of the hill through the apex. So you're going to move out to the left, but then you're going to try to come back to the right because there's a short, right? This is a tight uphill right-hander. I've seen people go really wide, and I've seen people go really tight and shallow. The track is pretty wide here. It doesn't really gain you anything to go way out to the left. You're just traveling a further distance. So I tend to stay to the inside. And you'll see that here, right? Our speed is a little better, but we turned in earlier on our optimal, right? So you see, we lose a little bit here, but then we gain it all back on as we come through this corner and exit. So even though we turned a little earlier, we gave a little bit up on entry. We tend to gain it back as we sort of. It's almost like it's not even a double apex. It's just a long apex, right? You just hug this sort of all the way up the hill. You can see we were able to get to the throttle sooner, and that has really caused our exit to be much faster as we get out of this corner. So that's just an example of how you can use this data that was collected from your Garmin Catalyst and synced with your Garmin Catalyst app to analyze your laps in performance, right? We've only made it maybe halfway, not even quite halfway through this this example for this track, for this session. But I hope that that gives you an example of like how you can use this data to really improve and optimize your performance. And if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, please comment below. And I really appreciate you and thank you for watching.